June 1374, Aachen. A man hit the cobblestones hard, his knees slamming into the stone. His limbs began to jerk in sharp, rhythmic spasms. He clawed at the ground, fingers digging into the gaps between the rocks, but he could not stop the motion. It was not a seizure. It was a rhythmic, mechanical pulsing. He forced himself upright, his head snapping back, eyes wide and tracking nothing. A woman standing 3 paces away watched him, her mouth opening to shout, but her own arm suddenly flew outward. Her shoulder rotated with a sickening pop. She gasped, then her legs began to churn against the ground. A child nearby dropped his wooden toy and started to pivot, his feet scraping the earth in time with the man. Within minutes, the square became a blur of erratic, spinning figures. They did not speak, they did not look at one another. They simply moved, limbs firing in a frantic, involuntary cadence that defied the laws of rest. The sound of boots grinding against stone rose into a steady, suffocating roar. The contagion had arrived. Decades passed, but the rhythm remained. By 1518, the contagion reached Strasbourg. It did not start with one man. It flooded the market square with hundreds of citizens all at once. The open space became a sea of stiff, mechanical limbs. They moved in perfect, agonizing unison, yet there was no melody to guide them. Every step was a forced, rhythmic strike against the earth. Dust kicked up in clouds, coating the dancers in a thick, gray film. From the windows of the Guildhall, the city council looked down, their hands gripping the wooden sills until their knuckles turned white. They shouted orders, but their voices were swallowed by the frantic, scraping sound of hundreds of feet grinding against stone. The council members paced the floor, faces tight with confusion and the weight of a failing city. They watched as the dancers continued to pivot, arms held rigid, heads tilted at unnatural angles. This was no longer a local tragedy. It was a citywide collapse of order. The dancers did not acknowledge the observers, nor did they acknowledge each other. They simply turned, locked in a singular, relentless motion that defied their own will. The council made their final decision. They hired musicians. If rhythm was the cause, they reasoned, perhaps a different tempo could break the cycle. The pipers and drummers set up on the Guildhall balcony. They played loud, steady beats, hoping to snap the citizens out of their trance. The effect was immediate, but not as intended. The dancers mirrored the music. They moved faster. Their steps grew jagged, reckless, and violent. The music acted like fuel on a fire. A woman collapsed, her ankle snapping with an audible crack, yet she crawled back up and resumed her rhythmic thrashing. A man fell, his chest heaving, his heart unable to maintain the frantic pace. He did not rise again. The sound of the music was now punctuated by the wet thud of bodies hitting the cobblestones. Bones fractured under the weight of the endless, forced motion. Feet bled, staining the market square in dark, rhythmic patterns. The musicians played on, their own faces pale, watching as the dancers pushed their bodies beyond the threshold of human endurance. Heart by heart, the crowd began to fail. The dance was killing them, and the music would not let them stop. Centuries later, historian John Waller dissected the wreckage of these events. He looked beyond the surface of the chaos. He found the source of the madness in the rye fields. The grain was plagued by ergot fungus, a potent toxin that induced hallucinations and uncontrollable, spastic tremors. But the poison alone was not the architect of the tragedy. It was the crushing weight of the era. Famine clawed at the city gates, disease rotted the foundations, and the shadow of religious terror loomed over every household. The people lived in fear of Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, convinced that his divine curse would trap them in an eternal, agonizing jig. This was the perfect storm. The toxin fractured the mind, causing it to detach from the body, while the weight of their own belief turned that detachment into a collective, inescapable trance. The dancers were not participants, they were prisoners. Their consciousness retreated into the dark corners of their minds, leaving their bodies to serve a rhythm dictated by fear and chemistry. It was a psychological fracture where the self vanished, replaced by the mechanical, twitching puppet of a dying society. The horror was complete. The sun dipped low, casting long, bruised shadows across the market square. The silence that followed was heavier than the screaming had ever been. One by one, the last of the dancers slumped to the ground, their momentum finally spent. They did not move. They lay among the fallen, chests heaving in the cooling air. As the twilight deepened, the survivors began to stir. They pushed themselves up with shaking arms, their movements slow, jagged, and foreign to their own intent. A woman reached out to steady herself against a stone pillar, her fingers pale and unresponsive. She stared at her hands. They would not stop trembling. The rhythmic pulse that had driven them for days was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching exhaustion. There was no victory in their survival, only the cold, haunting realization that their own flesh had turned against them. They stood in the quiet street, looking at the bodies of the neighbors who had not woken up, unable to comprehend the betrayal of their own nervous systems. The plague had passed, but the tremor remained in their bones. They looked into the darkening horizon, waiting for a normalcy that felt impossible to reclaim. The question of why it happened hung in the stagnant air, unanswered, leaving them as strangers in their own bodies.